Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajikacharya Stotara Sada Shri Srimad His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Jayam Vishnupada Paramahansa Parivrajikacharya Stotara Sada Shri Srimad His Divine Grace Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Maharaj Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Ananta Koti Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai. ISKCON Founder Acharya Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Jai. Prem Jai Ho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Radha Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Jai. Shri Shri Vrindavan Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Navadvip Dham Ki Jai. Shri Shri Mayapur Dham Ki Jai. Shri Jagannath Puri Dham Ki Jai. Tulasi Devi Ki Jai. Bhakti Devi Ki Jai. Ganga Maya Ki Jai. Jamuna Maya Ki Jai. Gaur Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. Shamaveda Bhakta Vrinda Ki Jai. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. Narayanam namaskritam naram chaivam dhanutaram devam sarasvati vyasam tato jaya mudirayat nasaprayeshu abhadireshu nityam bhagavata sevaya bhagavati utama shlokir bhakti bhavati naishtiki. Because today is the disappearance day of Jayananda Prabhu, we're not going to be reading Srimad Bhagavatam as we usually do. In other parts of the world, especially in Mayapur, there's always a big celebration on every appearance day or disappearance day of anyone, like Vishwanath Chakravarti, Rupa Goswami, Sridhar Swami, and so on. It's a big celebration. It sometimes goes all day and into the night. There's an elephant parade. And anyway, we don't do that here. But since I had some personal association with Jayananda, I'm going to be talking about him today. I have some notes. I've done this before, but today I'm going to try to talk about some things that I haven't talked about before. This is not going to be necessarily in chronological order, just like the Srimad Bhagavatam is not in chronological order. The most important things are highlighted, and sometimes they even come before the other things. So that happens. So I'm going to try my best to be chronological, but I'm going to divert and segue into some other things that happened that I remember, that I know about. Jayananda was born in 1939 on April 27th. He died in 1977 when he was 38 years old. So he didn't live a very long time, but he had a very special life. Just like Shankaracharya, I think he was died at about 36, but he's very much glorified for what he did and for his intelligence. So I've made a few notes, and one of the things that's really important about Jayananda is that he was one of, maybe the only person when Prabhupada was on this planet that Prabhupada said that he attained the spiritual world. So I'm going to read from one of his letters, and he wrote a letter to Jayananda as if he were living after he had departed. I'm going to read from this letter. And another thing is that Jayananda was mentioned in the Nectar of Devotion as a contributor to the book, and he's one of the few devotees who's mentioned by name in Prabhupada's books. So he has a kind of eternal presence in the form of those books. So this is the letter that Prabhupada wrote. I'm not going to read all of it, but I'm going to read some of it. It's written from Bombay on the 5th of May, 1977. This was just shortly after Jayananda left, and Prabhupada was informed of the conditions under which he left this world. If you had any tinge of material desire, he writes, my dear Jayananda, if you had any tinge of material desire, you have gone to the celestial kingdom to live with the demigods for many thousands of years and enjoy the most opulent life of material existence. From there you can promote yourself to the spiritual world. But even if one fails to promote to the spiritual world, and falls down to this globe and takes birth in a big family like a yogi or Brahmin, in an aristocratic family, he is very blessed. But, this is the key thing that Prabhupada said, as you were hearing Krishna Kirtan, I am sure that you were directly promoted to Krishna Loka. So the usual procedure is that someone who is advanced in Krishna consciousness takes birth in Vrindavan, maybe not even as a human being, but maybe even as an animal or an insect, and then goes back to Godhead in the next life. But in this particular letter that he wrote to Jayananda, he says that because you were hearing Krishna Katha, I am sure that you were directly promoted to Krishna Loka. An interesting thing that happened was that everybody liked Jayananda. I mean, he had all the qualities of the people we read about that existed maybe 500 years ago, Mongol Thakur and Vishwanath Chakravarti and others, but somehow we have some personal relationship with Jayananda. Prabhupada called him a silent worker. He never took sannyas, he was never a temple. He was very briefly, but he was kind of an older person. We were in our early 20s, some were even teenagers when he joined. And he was about 30 or 32 years old, and we thought, oh, if someone that old is joining the movement, that shows that we're being very successful. So he was driving a taxi cab, but he was born in Dayton, Ohio, and he attended Ohio University and had a bachelor's degree in industrial engineering. But he ended up driving a taxi cab because he said he didn't really like the corporate world. He didn't really fit in. So he was doing something, that was very kind of simple, and it didn't require a lot of education. But he did it anyway because he liked it. And he after one day he came to the temple. I was in San Francisco, 1966, and very shortly after, because he was very mature and very friendly, he became the temple president. He was the oldest person there in the temple at the time, and it was a very unusual thing. He made friends with people who gave donations. There was a place where the devotees went to get donations for various things, and they really appreciated Jayananda Prabhu. There was a guy that sold bananas to the temple, and Jayananda called him Banana King Louis. That name kind of stuck, Banana King Louis. So he was working on the Rath Yatra car because he was very attached to Rath Yatra. There's and people wouldn't even see him, just his legs were sticking out from the chassis of the Rath Yatra car. And he was working very hard. And then one day, Prabhupada was having, in San Francisco, a darshan up in his room, and Jayananda had been working all night. He'd been up all night working on the carts. And so during the darshan, he was dozing off a little, starting to fall asleep. And every time he dozed off, the devotee sitting next to him kind of nudged him. And he said, how can you do this? Prabhupada is talking. So this happened about 3 or 4 times. And people thought that Prabhupada wasn't noticing this, but apparently he was. One of the things he said that leave to the guy sitting next to Jayananda is leave him alone. He's doing more work than all of you put together. Those are almost his exact words. He's doing more work than all of you put together. And he wasn't a sannyasi. He wasn't GBC, he wasn't anybody, really important. That's why Prabhupada called him a silent worker. And he was very, very generous and very friendly. I mean, he had a car, and he gave it to me when I was a householder just to have, because I didn't live right in the temple, and I had to drive. So he just one day gave, it was a Ford Fairline station wagon. I remember 1965 or something like that. And so then we decided to have a Rath Yatra in Los Angeles, and it was the first time that it had ever happened. And so we were looking for a place, and I was in a car with Chandanacharya, with Rameshwar, and a few other people, and Jayananda in his wheelchair. He couldn't hardly walk. He had leukemia. He had a terminal kind of cancer, and he wasn't slated to live very long. So, but we were looking for a place, and we drove around to downtown Los Angeles, to the Wilshire area, and we didn't see there were any people there. This was during the week, and I mean, it's a sort of automobile city. People have a lot of cars, and they just don't hang out or walk around any place. So at the very end of the day, not the end of the day, at the end of our sojourn, we went to Venice Beach, and Venice Beach has a kind of promenade that it's really part of Los Angeles, but they call it Venice Beach. It's like a suburb, and there's a street, they call it Oceanfront Walk, that goes right along the beach, and on one side is just sand and the Pacific Ocean, which is always blue colored, as opposed to the Atlantic, which tends to be dark blue or black. And we pushed this wheelchair down the whole length of Oceanfront Walk. And as we got to the end, a policeman was standing right in front of us with his uniform, a uniformed policeman, and he was standing like kind of blocking our way. And we thought, oh my God, I don't know if he's going to arrest us. Maybe we're not supposed to have a wheelchair on this street or something like that. And there was a lot of people out there. We even saw a guy that was a skateboard enthusiast, and he had a dog, a German Shepherd, that was pulling him along. It's a very weird place. It was full of tourists from all over the state, from all over the city, from all over the world. And this policeman just stopped us dead. There were about four of us walking down the street, and then all of a sudden, suddenly he stopped this pose and put his hand out as if to shake hands to Jayananda, because Jayananda was in the wheelchair. And he said, "My name is Sergeant White, and I don't know if you know about this, but one of your men saved my partner's life. It was in downtown Los Angeles. There was a gunfight, and one of your men saved my partner's life, and I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart." And then after this incident, I mean, this was, and we never found out what actually had happened, or who the devotees were, or what, or who was saved, or anything. But after that incident, we decided that this is the place where Rath Yatra should be. First of all, there's a lot of people. Secondly, the police department would not ever block us or give us any trouble. So we decided to have it down there. And Oceanfront Walk is a kind of a long boulevard. It's about 2 or 3 kilometers long, and you just see the ocean and the sand on one side, and on the other side there's a few buildings. So I was organizing this with another devotee named Babu Burhan. He's a New Yorker. I don't know where he is now, but we decided to make this a big event because it was the very first time it would take place in this city, and this city was a well-to-do city. It wasn't, it's like Los Angeles. It's very sunny and warm, and people seem to there's a lot of Hollywood people that live in there. Hollywood is part of Los Angeles. So we decided to have it there. And at the end of the walkway, there's a grass area it's about 4 acres of grass, and it borders right on the sand. So it's a perfect place to end the thing. So we decided to have a lot of displays on this grass area. What we did was we made a chart, Babu Burhan and I, and it had on one axis it had the names of all the devotees that lived in Los Angeles. There's about 40. And on the other axis, the days of the week, the times, the dates, and everything. So everyone had something to do. Every single person got involved because they were on this schedule, on this roster, so to speak. And so we decided to make it a very memorable event. And at one point, we went to a place east of Los Angeles called Riverside. In Riverside, they train wild animals: tigers, lions, elephants, cheetahs, jaguars, some of the most violent animals, and they cut their nails. So, and they teach them how to jump on people without harming them. That's Hollywood for you. That's what happens. They're wild animals, but they're tame. They're tame. Teachers teach them how to jump on people without hurting them. So we went up there, and we said we want to purchase the use of 3 elephants, and they were kind of like bewildered that we would ask for elephants of all things. And they said, well, we can let you have the elephants, but their trainers have to go with them. Each elephant had a mahout, or a trainer. So that was done, and it was a little expensive, but it was done. And we had a contract, and they agreed. And this was just days before the event went on. So and then to make it very special, or to make it very colorful, we organized 3 people to sit on the backs of the elephants, dressed like clowns. They were completely painted with their faces and their arms and everything, men and women. And I think there were 2 girls and 1 boy sitting on top of the elephants. And one of them had a big horn, like a trumpet, but a very long thing with a horn on the end. And so it was a very spectacular event. And this parade went like that. There was an elephant between each car. And Jayananda used to, at the end of every day, Babu Burhan and I used to go to report to him what we have done during that day. And we had to get permission from many departments, because it's a very large city. So we had to get permission from the police, from the fire department, from the police department, from the Park and Recreations Commission. I mean, there were probably about 20 different departments that we had to go to. And so at the end of each day, we would go and report to Jayananda what we had done. And his response, he could barely talk, he was getting very sick, was, gosh, I don't know how you guys do it. I mean, he was so friendly that we didn't do anything. It was all on his energy that everything was happening. And even the Park and Recreation Commission, they're a pretty stately and a strict organization. They agreed that we could do this, and we could have the elephants, and we could do everything. We just had to get the permits to do it. So this was Jayananda's energy. And one of the really amazing things that happened was that a friend of his had gone to a place called Parkwood High School. I think it was Parkwood. Anyway, in Dayton, Ohio. And this other man was a very good friend of his. This is a man named Andrew Hallam that lived in Woodland Hills, just a little ways north of Los Angeles. And after Jayananda had passed away, this man saw a picture of him in the Rath Yatra cart in Durban, South Africa. I mean, here, it's very unusual that he would go all the way from Los Angeles to Durban, South Africa. But he thought, well, I'll take a holiday, do something exotic. So his friend took him to Durban. And it just so happened that was the day that the Rath Yatra was taking place there. And in the Rath Yatra cart, he saw a picture of Jayananda Prabhu, who had passed away years before. And he looked at his face and he said, I think I know that man. But I'm going to have to find out who he is. So he started asking people, who's that guy in the photograph? And everyone used to tell him, oh, that's Jayananda. And that didn't mean anything to this guy, because he knew him as James. James Kaur was his name. So he asked about 6 people, and they all said Jayananda, Jayananda, and that didn't mean anything to him. Finally, one of the last people knew what his birth name was. And then everything sort of, became clear to this man. And he was a good friend of his when they were in high school, Oakwood High School it was called, in Dayton, Ohio. And he knew that James Kaur's fathers had the same name. He was James Kaur Sr., and Jayananda was James Kaur Jr. So from Durban, South Africa, and he knew that James Kaur Sr. worked for a paint company, a big paint company. It was called Sherwin-Williams. It was a very big and famous house painting company. So somehow or other, this man decided he had to tell James Corr Sr. all about this. And he didn't know anything about his son, becoming, well known in the Hare Krishna movement. So from Durban, South Africa, he made a phone call to Denver, Colorado, which is no small feat. And then talking to the people at Sherwin-Williams, he asked them if there was any man employed there named James Corr. And finally, he talked to someone who said, "Okay, I know who this man is. He used to work here, but he's retired now. But I can and then he said, is there a way I can contact him?" And somehow he got the phone number of James Corr Sr. And he talked to James Corr Sr. and he said, "Do you know anything about your son? How he is famous now in the Hare Krishna movement?" And James Corr Sr. said he didn't know anything. And what Andrew Hallam's position was, he was the man who's like, I think they call them valedictorians, who at the end of every school year, he would do a little summary of what these people are doing now. And he was very surprised to see someone he knew in a faraway place like Durban, South Africa. So I'm going to read the letter. It says that he wrote to that year after he saw the Rath Yatra. "Dear Oakwood High School," I'm not going to read all of it. "Dear Oakwood High School classmates and friends, I want to tell you about my Christmas vacation trip to Durban, South Africa. This letter is about one of our classmates, Jim Corr. While in Durban on December 29th and 30th, 1989, I attended each day the Hare Krishna Festival of the Chariots, being held on the beachfront. To give you an idea of the size of the festival, they fed 52,000. I mean, it's not completely accurate, but this is what he wrote. They fed 52,000 plates of food on the first day. It was vegetarian food and given free to all who had wanted it. And it was tasty, ! The chariot was 45 feet tall, which is pretty accurate. It carried about a dozen people on it, throwing candies to the crowd. It was being pulled by members of the movement. The first day of the festival opened within a parade along Durban's Golden Mile in front of all the luxury hotels. On the chariot are painted figures of Krishna and his consort, a wax museum model of the man who brought Hare Krishna to the West, and that's Prabhupada, of course, and a photo of a man in Hare Krishna robes. The photo was about 2½ by 3 feet. I asked my South African friends, who knew a lot about Hare Krishna, who the photo was of. He said he didn't know. The second day of the festival, my friend drew me into a conversation with a French woman who had lived in South Africa for 20 years and had been in the Hare Krishna for 11 years. I told her about my classmate who died in San Francisco in 1977 while active in Hare Krishna. She asked his name. I'm going to read this. I told her that she told me that it was Jim Corr. She asked me if he didn't recognize him because Jim Corr, or Jayananda, was shaved up, and he looked very different because of that. When he knew him, he was like 18 years old or 17 years old and was going to high school, and he had long hair. She told me it was Jim Corr, 2 exclamation points. They call him by his Krishna name of Jayananda, but she knew his Jim Corr name too, and she knew about his college degree. I was flabbergasted, to say the least. That day I spoke to about a dozen Hare Krishna members who all knew the full story of Jim Corr, or Jayananda, as they always call him. They all know about his death from leukemia, his strength at the end of his life, and his devotion to the Krishna movement. And these people, by the way, Andrew Hallam, who used to live in Woodland Hills north of Los Angeles, is no longer living. This is from 1977. He was already in his 40s or 50s. These people have not been to the USA and probably joined Hare Krishna after Jim died in 1977, but they all knew about him. Here are some of the stories they told me. Jim took money that Mr. and Mrs. Kaur sent him for painkiller prescriptions and used it instead to design and build bigger and better chariots. Jim is responsible for the development of the Festival of the Chariots. And they held these festivals worldwide. Once a year, they have a day honoring Jim, and they fast on that day. In San Francisco, Jim was responsible for dealing with the outside community. He was so popular that the devotees, before they had Rath Yatra, they used to meet with city officials, including the chief of police. And one of the women who worked for them, the first thing she said when all the devotees came to start their meeting was, "Where's Jim?" And then we told her the sad news that he had passed away a few years before. And then she left the room. She had lost it, as they say. She had started to weep, and she didn't want people to see her. So she left, and then she composed herself, and she came back after a while. So she was one of the people. There were many people who had that kind of relationship with him, that they thought he was a special person, not just a friendly person, but a special person. People who didn't like dealing with Hare Krishna's folk did like to deal with Jim. Jim is mentioned in one of the books written by the man who brought Hare Krishna. That's Nectar of Devotion. The book is Nectar of Devotion. In their South African newsletter that was being passed out at the festival, Jim is quoted, telling about the first festival in San Francisco in 1970s, saying how primitive that chariot was in comparison to the present chariots, at least in Durban. That He directed his last festival from his wheelchair. I have a photo of the front of the chariot showing the photo of Jim. The photo was not taken to show Jim, since I didn't know at that time that it was Jim. And I have newsletter photos of the whole chariot to show the size of it. I'll bring these to the next OHS, I guess that's Ohio State University, reunion in 1992. One of the Hare Krishna devotees narrated. He doesn't need anything to perfect. I was repeatedly asked, what was Jim like in school? Well, that was quite a few years ago. I had even forgotten, or just not even given a thought to that fact, that Jim and I lived in the same cabin in summer camp. I forgot that until I came upon the 1951 camp photo. And the photo of Jim on the front of the chariot is unrecognizable because of the years. This was 10 years after his high school, or more than that, more like 12 or 15. The Hare Krishna robes Jim is wearing, and because, as they said, the photo is not a good one because it was not taken until Jim was very ill. I told them that Jim was very funny. They said that they could believe it and understand that from what they had heard about him. I was told that Jim worked very hard. When he cleaned the garbage cans, He cleaned them so well, quote, open quote, because they were Krishna's, close quote. New devotees would see his work and think, quote, open quote, if this is how thoroughly the garbage cans have to be cleaned, how much more important work is done? How much more important work is to be done? Close quote. One time, Jim was a leader. When he was a leader, he returned late at night and saw that a chore had not been done properly. Rather than awaken the offender, Jim had the job done over again himself. He could run on very little sleep. A surprise birthday party was given for Jim, but he was truly embarrassed by all this. I'm going to pass out a picture of him. We had to tell a little white lie. The person who built the carts, built all 3 carts, built them all from scratch, even the wheels. So we told him that he had to go out and answer a question about construction because he had a degree in industrial engineering and designed all the carts. He was the only one who knew the answer to this question. The builder had him, he just was stumped. We told him that. It wasn't actually true. But what we had done is we gathered around in this parking lot, around the chariots. And when I say we, it was like about 30 people. Because while we were going to celebrate the passing of Jayananda. So now the next time you see a Hare Krishna devotee on the street, go up and tell him or her that you went to school with Jayananda. You'll get red carpet treatment. The story of Jayananda will be known. And remember, I was in South Africa, which is 11,000 miles from Los Angeles, and they all knew. Now, then he continued to say what other people were doing. So that's the story that he told in a letter. And I got this, somehow I got a hold of this letter, and it's in my computer. So that's just one of many stories that you could talk about this person for many lifetimes or for many years, or, I don't know. If anyone has anything else to say, speak up. Yes. A lady from the fruit market.
And she heard about him passing. She was very upset. But he seemed to have that same very friendly effect on everybody.
Well, I'm gonna add one thing, that when we wheeled him out and his wheelchair out to the Ratha Yatra carts, he insisted on speaking, but he could hardly talk. He couldn't walk, he couldn't talk, but he somehow or other stood up, and in a very weak and warbly voice, he started talking about how important Ratha Yatra is. So I have a picture of this event, and I'm going to pass it around for you to look at. And one of the women who lives in Los Angeles made cakes that look exactly like Ratha Yatra carts. They had this, you'll see them in the photograph. They're the same color. I think. Yeah, there's one there. And she used donuts for wheels. And he loved this prasadam. But he didn't, although it was made for him, he didn't take any of it himself. He gave all the pieces that he got to the children. And this is another photograph of them, the children getting his cakes. So he could barely stand and barely talk, but he stood up and glorified Ratha Yatra. So that was a very, and then, this is the last thing, at the Ratha Yatra festival, it just so happened that one of the devotees, this is very rare, happened into the office of CBS. That was one of the big 3 networks, CBS, ABC, and NBC. And had pictures of a Ratha Yatra, and tried to convince the man that, well, this is a good piece of news. Why don't you put it on the news? And the news is when it's shown at any time, it's usually about plane crashes, about football games, about politicians condemning one another, and murders, and all. So this was the only positive thing. And that night, after the Ratha Yatra, I gathered with about 4 or 5 devotees in Rameshwar's room, and we watched the evening news. And it just so happened that the reporter, who used to work for another program called 60 Minutes, I don't know if you know 60 Minutes, but it's a program that always tries to look on the dark side of everything. So this man was sitting to give a report about the Rath Yatra, and right behind him, the whole wall behind him was a picture of the Jagannath Puri temple. I don't know where they got it, but they had it. And out of all these, there were about 100,000 people gathered. It was a big thing. This reporter happened to just happen. It was Krishna's arrangement, but it seemed like it was just fate or destiny or something like that, or providence, that she happened upon Mr. and Mrs. Kaur, Mr. James Kaur Sr. and his wife. And she asked them, where are you from? What part of this city? Or what part of the state? Or what part of any state? And they said, we're from Denver, Colorado. And she was very shocked. And she said, well, what brings you all the way out to here? That's halfway across the country. That's like 1,700 kilometers away. And they told her, my son built designed these chariots and built them. And he died about 3 or 4 months ago. And that became the soundbite for the news. And we all saw this on television after we were watching Ed Bradley and all the horrible things that are on the news. The last thing, about 7 minutes, was about Mr. and Mrs. Kaur and James Kaur and the origin of the charts. So that it made the whole effort. It was a kind of a proof that this was the right thing to do. So that was the end of the festival. It ended in a very positive way. So, of course, there are many things that we could say about Jayananda and the contacts he had with a lot of people. But if there's anything, I mean, I've tried to be as chronological as I could, but I know I've missed a lot of stuff, and maybe some of you have heard some things that I haven't heard. If you do, just speak up or ask anything. That maybe I have heard some things that I need to be reminded about. Yes? By the way, in that picture, some of you may not recognize Jayananda. He's the man sitting in the wheelchair. And just to his left, the person in saffron is myself. And this was taken in 1977. So I'm probably not very recognizable, but I'm in there. Go ahead, Ramai, Maharaj.
Yeah, I read that in the early days of San Francisco, Jayananda would like to come to Prabhupada's classes in the morning because the hippies were still asleep, and quite often he was the only one there. And there was Prabhupada giving the class, and only Jayananda was listening. And then later on, Prabhupada cooked some prasadam and just fed only Jayananda. Prabhupada actually cooked the prasadam, and the description was there was no conversation practically. So Prabhupada giving Jayananda more and more prasadam, and he was the only devotee there.
That reminds me of one incident that occurred when in the temple in Los Angeles, the proprietor of the temple, the president, so to speak, hired a hospital bed, and this hospital bed was erected inside of a flat that all devotees lived in. And he used to get prasadam from this one woman who made the cakes. And he asked her, one day he asked someone to ask her if she could make pakoras. And she said, yeah, I know how to make pakoras. So a little later that day, they brought a whole tub of these. There were about 50 pakoras in them. And the guy was practically dead. He was so sick. But he ate the whole tub of 50 pakoras. And people were just amazed. Yes?
I'll just read a little. This is from my Vaishnava phone app. And it's got a whole list of Jayananda's glories in there. I'll just read one small paragraph. Once a new boy at the temple wanted to do some service and was asked to help with the trash, the garbage. The weekly trash run was done by Jayananda, who cheerfully took the little help the boy gave. Later, when the boy became a devotee, he remembered thinking, if the garbage man at this temple can be so blissful, just imagine what the rest of the devotees are like.
I want to read one last thing that I was going to read before, but somehow or other it slipped my mind. And this was found. I recently found it on the Google or on the net. I don't know if it was on Google or what, but it's called A Hospice Miracle, Serving Jayananda's Mother, thanks to Suvarna Radhika. She was the one who wrote this. Thanks to Suvarna Radhika, Mataji for showing this. Derived from a letter by Kalindi Dasi and her spiritual master Chandra Muli. A hospice miracle seeing Jayananda's mother. His mother was called Jane Kaur. And so she passed away sometime after he did, which is kind of unusual right there because, usually the mother passes away after the son does, but it was just the other way around. So she said in mid-July, this is the letter, in mid-July I started wearing tilak to my work in the hospice. I thought that since many other spiritual practitioners were expressing their faith by wearing crosses, doves, silk threads, pentacles, and other items, I would wear my tilak, which tells the world that I am a devotee of the Lord. And I found that wearing tilak at work has opened the door for spiritual questions and conversations. So this is another way of saying it's very important to always wear a tilak. It just happened that I'm not saying, I'm not reading this because I have an axe to grind, but I think it's a very true thing. In the morning of Monday, August 6, 2007, after our daily report and medical staff checks, we began our usual tasks of caring for the patients. As ours is only a 10-bed facility, we are able to give loving care to each patient individually. Often, while I care for or bathe patients who are unable to do such tasks for themselves, I chant or sing the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. I'm going to put some specs so I can see this. On this particular morning, I was caring for a woman named Jane Kaur, who had been with us for almost a week. She was a kind and polite person, and I enjoyed the time I spent with her. Around 8 a.m. on August 6th, I entered her room and found that she was getting closer to leaving her body. As unresponsive to verbal cues, her body was limp. I sang the Maha Mantra one last time while she received the final bath. Hospice staff called her family, who were always friendly and appreciative for her care. When I was finished, I spoke with some of the family members in the hall. Jane's grandson approached me to thank me, and then pointed to his forehead and to my tilak and asked if I was a Hare Krishna. I smiled and said that yes, I was a Hare Krishna. Well, he said, then maybe you know of my uncle Jayananda. The Jayananda? I asked. Yes, he said, and told me how his uncle had built the Rath Yatra carts. He then went in to inform his mother that I was a Hare Krishna. Gaynell, Jayananda Prabhu's sister, came out of the room and said that she was so happy that a Krishna devotee had cared for her mother. The whole family expressed that it meant so much to them. Gaynell was saying that she couldn't believe that I was a Hare Krishna. She said that she told her mother, but she wasn't sure that her mom could hear her. I said that I had a feeling she already knew, and I laughed. Jane, a granddaughter, mentioned that she remembered her uncle making really good, great Indian food and offering it to God, and then the family sitting on the floor and eating it. She remembered his robes and how happy he was. Jane said that he had been pretty depressed before meeting devotees. In Prabhupada's books, he writes that a father, a grandfather, and a great-grandfather, sometimes he says 20 generations back, sometimes he says 50, sometimes he says 60, they're all liberated, forward and backward. So that means that children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and so on, 20 generations into the future are all liberated. I mean, that's what it's in there. It's in Prabhupada's books. I let Jayananda's family know that during Rath Yatra festival, we hung a nice photo of him next to the Srila Prabhupada's photo. He told me that an old friend of Jayananda's, who is not a devotee, happened to be in Durban several years ago and saw the first Rath Yatra, and I read that letter. They told me that Jayananda was very kind. Even as a child, he never spoke badly of others. From the many stories they told me, his saintly qualities shone, though even in his childhood. Gaynell told me that her brother had once spent hours on a family vacation at a beach picking ticks and fleas off of a homeless dog. They couldn't stand to watch it suffering. He couldn't stand to watch it suffering. Jayananda's nephews told me about running around the kitchen table as a small child with his uncle, who was laughing and chanting Hare Krishna. When I went back into Jane's room, the family was gathered around her, holding her hand. Her breaths were faint, and she was about to leave her body. I stepped out to give the family some space, and about 5 minutes later, they came back to the front desk and asked me to look at her. When I opened the door, I saw that her body had turned yellow and waxy. It was apparent that the soul had left the body and that the physical body was all that remained. The nurse reported that she had passed, and the family, though sad, also felt relief. Gaynell told me that she had asked her brother, for support. Since she couldn't physically be at their mother's passing, she had been looking for a sign that he was supporting her. She felt that a devotee's being present and caring for her mother was not a mere coincidence. It was, I believe, Krishna's endless mercy! I thanked the relatives for allowing me to serve their family, offered my pranams, and said, Hare Krishna. So, I mean, we could talk for many lifetimes, but if there's anything that you think is important, go ahead. Rupa?
Maharaj, was also said, I believe in the Prabhupada Lilamrita, that Jayananda Prabhu, when he was temple president, he was practically solely maintaining the whole temple financially himself by the taxi driving. And when he would give Bhagavatam classes, he was a little reluctant to give Bhagavatam classes, but when he did, he'd tell stories of all the people he picked up in the taxi and how they were suffering, and he'd preach to them and give them prasadam and
Thank you.
and books. And also, you were mentioning the Nectar Devotion. Prabhupada says, I think it's in Nectar Devotion, Prabhupada says, thank you very much to Jayananda Prabhu, who gave, was it $5,000 to
Something like that.
publishing the book? Yeah.
Maybe some things were a little exaggerated, but it's probably all true. Anything else?
Well, I'll just read one more little one. This is about his service attitude. Jayananda was an expert at everything: cooking, preaching, deity worship, public relations, sankirtan, selling incense, construction, and anything that it took to spread Krishna consciousness. He was a tireless worker, first to rise in the morning and the last to sleep at night. He was always running out to get flowers, washing dishes, cleaning the kitchen, or taking out the trash. Whatever service he was given, he would make sure that it was done, no matter how busy he was or how much personal hardships he had to endure for it. No matter how hard he was working, he would never stop for a nap during the day. He seemed inexhaustible.
Thank you. So this gives us a little glimpse into the lives of people like Pundarik, Vidyanidhi, Ramananda Roy, and the Goswamis, what they were actually like. They were very friendly, always good-natured, and turning positive things into negative things. One of the things that is written in a book is that when he passed by, he was in Fisherman's Wharf sometimes. That's part of San Francisco, Fisherman's Wharf. And there was a guy that was selling lobsters to the people. And he had a habit of throwing hot, sticky water onto the devotees when they passed by for Harinams. And it so happened that Jayananda made friends with this guy. He said, thank you for participating with our Harinams. And from there on, it became a very friendly conversation. You were going to add something?
In 2011, the GBC agreed to have a memorial, like a samadhi for Jayananda Prabhu in Jagannath Mandir in Mayapur. And then just they decided that this is so befitting because of so much service he did for Lord Jagannath. And the quote, it's from Prabhupada's letter that he wrote. He said, Janananda's death is glorious. He has left his body very wonderfully, and he has been transferred to Vaikuntha. Everyone should follow the example of Jayananda. I am very proud that I had such a nice disciple. If possible, Jayananda's picture should be hung in the Rath of Lord Jagannath, and in all of our temples a day may be set aside for holding a festival in his honor, just as we do in the disappearance day of the other great Vaishnavas.
Thank you. Very good. You had your hand raised, Daksha? No? Okay. I think that's all we probably have time for, although we could go on for many lifetimes. Hare Krishna.
Jayananda Prabhu ki jai.
Mr. John, you had a little bag that I carried? You had a bag that I carried? There's something I have.
Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama, Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Hare Rama, Rama Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Rama Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna Krishna